There was always a sense that I was different.
And she kind of just reassured me with real life examples that that's not how it was.
It's taken a while to unpack it all because it's a weird thing that have to come out.
I wasn't 100% sure I was lesbian.
And one of my kids fell out in the bikini set. Families are a great thing, but I have one now with my husband being gay because it was on TV when I was growing up.
Shouting 2, 4, 6, 8, gay is just as good as straight.
Precious queer youth are taken care of.
I've been mistaken for a man ever since age 20.
And yet back then also you had that freedom to express yourself in these places.
Wait, so like all of these people are LGBTQ?
You're listening to LGBTI Conversations with Anthony Doig. On today's show, our next guest is a proud Aboriginal Yuin man who as a child didn't like reading because he could never find anyone that truly represented him, either his Aboriginal culture or his homosexuality. He surely has changed that. With his second book out, We Didn't Think It Through, followed by his first book, The Boy from the Mish, aka Ready When You Are If You're Living in the US, represents him, his culture, and the queer community. Welcome to LGBTI Conversation, Gary Lonesborough.
Hi, thanks very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Your second book out, We Didn't Think It Through.
Yeah, it's very exciting times. Very much looking forward to meeting some readers and getting to sign some books. And
now, if you could tell me a bit more about what people can expect from the book.
It's a book about a 16-year-old Aboriginal boy named Jamie who is living in a small coastal country town, living with his auntie and uncle. And one night, him and his friends steal a car and he ends up in juvie. And the story is really about him learning to understand how to express his emotions, how to understand his emotions, but also it's about him reconnecting with his family and ultimately reconnecting with himself. It's a story about the importance of family and culture and love to a young Aboriginal person.
During the writing of this story, did you pull anything from your personal surroundings to put into the book, or is it pretty well fiction?
It is very much fiction, but definitely drew on a lot of my own experiences in writing. So through work, I've spent a lot of time working with Aboriginal boys in one of the juvies here in Sydney. The character of Jamie is very much inspired by a combination of a couple of those boys I'd worked with one-on-one. I think I've been working with young people for nearly 6 years now. Their stories inspire me. Really just wanted to, give a voice to those kids because their voices are rarely ever heard or given any volume. And obviously there are older Aboriginal characters in the book that provide a bit of guidance and love for Jamie, and very much inspired by the elders and my parents and my grandparents that I had guiding me as I was growing up. And I really wanted to capture that feeling of connection and how important it is for an Aboriginal person.
So what's the process of starting to write a book? How do you start at the beginning? Where does that come from? Is it things that you see during your daily life that you think, I could put that into you put it away in your memory and you think I can come back to that and that would make a good book, or that would make a good chapter of a book?
Good question. I guess, I'm what they call a pantser. So some writers will categorize themselves as plotters or pantsers. So plotters like to plot out the whole story or large chunks of the story before they start actually writing. So they want to know certain points that they're writing to. They want to know usually how it's going to end. But pantsers just have an idea and start writing and see where it takes them. So I'm very much a pantser. I have an idea. I kind of let it grow and become in my head. My own process, I like to kind of sit with the idea for a while. So for We Didn't Think It Through, I probably sat with it for a good 2 months, just thinking about the story, thinking about Jamie, thinking about where it could go. And then I write down some notes about the story, certain big story moments that might have come to mind. For this book, it was the stolen car. That was the first kind of point of interest for me. It was kind of this idea of these three young Aboriginal boys going on a car chase with the police through the bush. That was kind of the fire that was lit in my mind, and it all just sort of started from there, and it obviously ballooned into this much bigger story about what it means to be a young Aboriginal man in Australia in the modern day, the importance of family and connection to culture, all these other kind of issues I wanted to speak about or explore. Kind of starts from an idea and I guess the first image, and then I just write and see where it goes. The story has evolved quite a lot from that first draft, but that's kind of the process. The downside of that is I've started and stopped a lot of stories. So I've had a lot of ideas that I thought were really good and started writing and gotten so far into it and then realized that it wasn't going to amount to anything interesting. So I had to kind of give it up. But that's also, a big part of being a writer is knowing when to stop and when to move on to something else.
You hear that a lot about singers. They'll start writing a song and they'll realise, it's got no legs, or they don't really feel it for that moment. But then 5-6 years down the track, they come back and they finish it and it turns out to be a number one hit. Do you have any number one hit books lying around that you may come back to?
I just have this dystopian fiction story that I wrote probably just before my first book. I got about 50,000 words into it, and then I realised that I was writing from the wrong perspective, and I wanted a different character to be the main character. And at the time, I just felt like too much work, so I just shelved it, and maybe I'll go back to it one day. But I did really love the idea, the premise, and I kind of knew how it was going to end, so I was really excited to write that ending and see how it would read as a whole story. But at the time, I just couldn't do it, so I just moved on to what ended up becoming my first novel, The Boy from the Mish. But there's definitely that one that I'd like to go back to at some point, maybe after some time. And it's a daunting task to kind of go back to having to restart a whole book from scratch. That's one that comes to mind.
Now, I love how you use you're a proud Yuin man. And I said that correct, or did I just totally mess that up?
Yuin.
Yuin man.
Yep.
And I love how you use your Aboriginal culture within your story writing. This book and also the other book, The Boy from the Mish, which is another great book. I absolutely loved that one. Not to say I don't love this new one. This one is just as great, but I kind of had a connection with the other one as well. And you were saying when you were younger, you didn't like reading because there was no one who represented you in books.
Yeah, I guess something that I didn't really think about it too much at the time, but it was really important. There's this book called Looking for Alabrandy that we had to read, which apparently is a really good book. It's really important to a lot of people, so I've heard. But I remember reading it in probably year 8, and there was just nothing I just couldn't see myself in any aspect of that character. And it just felt so far removed from my own experience, my own life, that it was really hard for me to connect with it. And I found that all through high school, or trying to read books and just not having any kind of emotional investment in any of the characters I was presented with. Definitely believe that it's really important that young people have access to stories that do represent them. So, diversity in literature, and especially more Australian stories. I think there's a heavy focus on American books or, the classics in schools and in the English classes. So I definitely love to see a lot more Australian texts get studied, and a lot more diversity in those texts, culturally and different sexualities and presentations. I think representation is everything when it comes to hooking a young person into reading.
And there was definitely no Aboriginal gay boys in the storybooks you were reading, and definitely not Looking for Alabrandy. There was definitely none of them characters in that book.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I actually remember I was coming to the end of writing The Boy from the Mish, and then I had 2 conflicting thoughts. One was that it was pretty good, and I thought that maybe I had a shot at getting published with this one. And the other thought was, well, I never read any Aboriginal stories or Aboriginal writers, or definitely no queer Aboriginal stories growing up. And off the top of my head, I can't name any books by Aboriginal writers or any books that had Aboriginal gay characters or queer characters. So I started thinking that maybe there's just no market for that, or publishers don't really want to publish that kind of story, which I later found out the opposite is true. this amazing kind of field of stories that could be told, and it's just about getting them published and getting them into the hands of readers. But yeah, I'd definitely love to see more of that because it was definitely missing when I finished high school. And yeah, I only finished high school in 2013, so it wasn't even that long ago.
So the book culture with representation of everyone has come a long way even in that short time.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Or as the book was coming out, I got exposed to the whole kind of the vast range of books that are available and the range of experiences that are available for readers. Yeah, I think the main barrier is, getting teachers and librarians to market those books and to promote them to the young people that we write for and get them to read them. I think, just having access to something, whether they read it or not, and just knowing that it exists is probably, better than nothing. So definitely would love, more kind of promotion in schools and libraries for these diverse stories.
And do you think that's still a bit of a sticking point that teachers and librarians are not getting as much out there to the children as they should? Or do you think it's working pretty well at the moment how it is?
I think it's definitely improving. I actually did a presentation at the English Teachers Conference in Canberra, and I actually got to speak with a lot of English teachers, and a lot of them had promoted my book to their students or read my book in class, and were really keen to kind of talk about getting more diversity in the classroom in terms of the books that were being read. So I'm definitely feeling hopeful and definitely seeing that it's improving, and we will continue to do so.
Now, going back to The Boy from the Mish is also called Ready When You Are in the US. Can you tell us about that?
So Ready When You Are is the American version of The Boy from the Mish.
Okay. So why?
It got an American release. They wanted to change the title and the cover. So that's what happened. It was the same story. Yeah.
Wow, okay. Because it came across as it was another book, which I suppose in a way it's another title. So why did the US change the name?
This is funny. I've had so many people message me or, when I meet them somewhere, say to me that, I didn't even realize you had a second book out. And I saw this on Instagram. I didn't realize you were publishing another book. But yeah, it was the same one. So I was very against changing the title at first. I felt very protective of it. What I was told was that, The Boy from the Mish, American readers wouldn't know what a mish is by reading the title. So they wouldn't pick up the book. And then I was also told that for the young adult audience in America, titles like The Boy From or The Girl Who, those kinds of titles are usually marketed towards younger readers. So they just wanted to avoid a 6-year-old picking up the book, which is understandable. Luckily, it was my suggestion, the title, Ready When You Are. But yeah, it was just a matter of negotiating and coming to an agreement on the title. And they wanted a different cover that was more, I guess, kind of portrayed the characters in a more adult way, which the Ready When You Are cover does.
Right, that's very interesting. That do you think they could have called it The Boy from the Bronx if they wanted to do something American-like?
Yeah, and this is the thing. And I also had to Americanize a lot of words. Which, look, at the end of the day, I'm getting published in America. That's amazing. Not every writer does, so I'm very thankful for that. But I did have to Americanize a lot of words. Like ute became truck. Songs became flip-flops, obviously. Yeah, a lot of these little things. But we don't do that for American books that get released in Australia. So it just feels kind of like it's just more work that needs to be done. I mean, I know personally, when I read books from other countries, I'm interested in, the subtle differences between language and cultural experiences. Yeah, that's something that I enjoy. I would think American readers enjoy that as well. To read a whole book from start to finish and fully be immersed in the Australian language. I'm not really complaining. I'm very grateful for the publication. But yeah, that's kind of what happened.
Right, so that makes so much sense. But yeah, you're right. You think you open a book and no matter where it's from throughout the world, you go on a journey and there is different words there that you may need to look up because you're not too sure. But that is part of the excitement of a book. So yeah, it is interesting that you have to more Americanize the book. I don't even know if that's a real word, but that's what they did because I suppose we're so flooded with American culture here in Australia that we know both sides, but America can be very kind of isolated in that way.
Yeah, but I will say that the actual contents of the book didn't change at all. So the cultural elements are still very strong. Like, it's all the same. The only other thing I really had to do was to, like, certain sections of writing when I was speaking about culture or history, just like add an extra line or two to add a bit more explanation around it for an American reader. But yeah, the spirit of the story remained the same, which I'm really thankful for.
Because, yeah, it is such a great book. We're going to call it The Boy from the Mish because we're here in Australia, aka Ready When You Are. If you're listening in the US, just so we don't get people confused, it is the same book.
Yeah. Yes.
So tell me about putting that story together, because it's a fantastic story. I love the characters. I love how you wrote it, and you bring in your culture as well. It was just an amazing journey. So talk me through how it was built out.
The original idea started as this love story. It was very much a summer romance, holiday romance story when I first wrote it. I guess similar to We Didn't Think It Through, how I had the idea of this car chase. I had this image of Jackson and his friends sneaking through this campsite when everyone else is sleeping and stealing alcohol from Eskies. So yeah, I kind of grew from that through rewriting and revising and putting a lot more of myself into the book. It really became the story that it is now. Exploring all the other things I wanted to explore, like the homophobia, the racism, and really just what it's like to grow up as an Aboriginal kid in Australia and to also be wrestling with your identity in the way Jackson is. That all became very strong in the later read drafts. So yeah, it was just a lot of writing, rewriting, a lot of editing, and enhancing the secondary characters as well. I think in the original drafts, I kind of really vaguely wrote Jackson's mum and his auntie. Like, they were there, but they weren't really doing much. So, infusing culture into the story really allowed me to explore their characters a lot more, and also to explore the role that art and storytelling plays in Aboriginal culture.
Yeah, I like it, especially how you use the painting as kind of a bit of a centerpiece for the auntie and the mum to kind of come into it with their project out the back. And then you can go back to the two main characters. That was pretty cool. I suppose it kind of lends itself to a sequel in a way. It wasn't totally finished. Would I be right in saying that?
Well, for me, that was the right ending. So I was more than happy to just leave it there. I did do it was a queer teen book club meet at a bookshop here in Sydney, where I basically just spent an hour with young people, queer teens, who'd read the book as part of their book club. And one of them asked me if I thought about writing just a 100-page novella just showing Jackson and Thomas in love after the events of the story. And thought never had occurred to me at all to continue the story until they'd asked. I mean, I kind of do know like what happens next. I've got a version of it in my head anyway. Maybe one day I'll explore it. Never say never.
Keep us all hanging on. Now, you were saying that your parents, your mum and dad, are great storytellers, and it goes with the culture of the Aboriginal. They're great storytellers, and throughout 40,000 years, most of that was done through story. So you'd learn a few things during that time on how to tell a good story. Was they ever an influence to you wanting to write?
Yeah, like my mum always had books around the house. My parents used to tell us stories all the time, mostly ghost stories as little kids. But yeah, Mum always had books. I guess once the teacher had identified that I had a bit of a talent for writing and relayed that message to my dad, he became very supportive in trying to encourage me to be a writer or to write more as a kid. So, he bought me an exercise book that I could write in. They were very supportive of me growing up and exploring the writing. Definitely carried that on into my adult life.
Well, lucky you did, because you wouldn't have these great books that are out now if you didn't pursue that. And I suppose not wanting to really be interested in reading because you didn't see characters like yourself in the books when you were younger. That's probably a pretty influential stage of someone growing up, whether they love reading or writing or an author to not doing it at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it was, originally it was just the love of stories and like the love of reading books. I like to escape into stories and get to know a character and share their experiences with them. Yeah, I just always loved the whole idea of just making up a story and entertaining people.
Now, you grew up in the South Coast, a town called Bega in New South Wales in Australia. Can you tell us a bit about the journey of you coming out?
I was probably around 12, 13, going into high school. Yeah, it was something I was very scared of because, I was also very much like Jackson in the book, very scared of being rejected, very scared of losing those relationships with my friends and family, losing my place in the community. Decided to just go into full-on denial and think it was just a phase, or I could trick myself into liking girls, which I did quite successfully for a few years, but it didn't pan out that way. Moved away to Sydney and finally decided that it was time to actually explore that side of myself and that it could be possible to be okay. I started off by telling a couple of people after I'd kind of gone through that journey, and just kind of slowly over the next 2 years, just coming out to different people in different ways. Never had any kind of resistance to it or no bad reactions, no homophobic reactions. Yeah, everyone's been very supportive. Yeah, my dad was probably more excited about The Boy from the Mish coming out than I was. So, yeah, I've been very lucky. And I know a lot of people don't have that same positive experience, but to have all my family and friends remaining in my life and no one reacting badly, well, not to my face anyway. So, yeah, I've been very fortunate.
You were saying that with your friends growing up, you knew you were, or possibly you were, but you'd just talk about girls and stuff like that just to fit in. I think we all can relate to that growing up as a teenager. Did you ever find that being in a small country town, that being yourself was going to be a big thing?
Yeah, I definitely partook in those conversations about girls. Yeah, I had a couple girlfriends in high school as well. I was definitely making an effort. I think at the time, I didn't really have anyone to look up to in the community. Like, there was maybe like one or two gay people that were openly gay in town. One of them was the hairdresser, and everyone knew he was gay. Yeah, like these people had this label on them, so they were different. That was what I was really scared of, was people talking about me behind my back, or people labeling me as the gay guy. I think nowadays there are a lot more supports in that area for young queer kids. I went to my old high school when the book first came out and did a talk, and I was amazed to find out that they had a pride club there, which, just didn't exist. Like, it was never even thought of when I was at school there. So very positive changes happened, I think.
And what I find really interesting, especially within the Aboriginal community, is homosexuality or gay wasn't really a thing until the First Fleet came over and bring all their stereotypical judgment with them. But within the Aboriginal community, it was just, there wasn't a word for it. And it was not as demoralised as it was in white culture, which I find really fascinating, that we could be so further ahead as a people if we didn't have all these typical attachments go with, like as you were saying, in your town, the hairdresser was gay, and that's kind of, oh, well, that's so stereotypical. You know what I mean? And all this feeds into people who know they're gay and are younger and coming out, and all that causes a lot of, I suppose, trauma unnecessarily.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I love Kylie Minogue, always have, and I didn't really think about it till maybe 16, 17, that my love for Kylie might out me, or I didn't want to be that stereotypical gay guy that loved Kylie. But I am very much that now, and I'm very openly proud of that now. But yeah, at the time I remember feeling kind of, worried about how I was going to come across, or like how obvious that would be to people who knew me. And also that, I was just, following the trends of being another gay guy that loved Kylie.
That's okay. There's many of them out there. There's thousands of them out there. You're in good company. You found your parents and your greater family were okay with it? Yeah,
it was a very non-issue. I was a very big deal in my head, and then it wasn't. It was all good.
That's how it should be.
Yeah. I think I've been very fortunate to have the family and the friends that I've had.
Now, you also worked on some films. Jasper Jones?
Yeah, it was good. I was an intern, a paid intern, I might add, as a post-production sound attachment. So I was helping out the sound designer and working with his team of sound editors for 6 weeks. It was really good. It was a really cool experience. Long working days, but yeah, I met so many great people. I met Hugo Weaving. Yeah, a really cool experience, and I feel like all of the experience I had with filmmaking has just given me more tools for my writing belt and how I tell stories. So yeah, I definitely look back at not just Jasper Jones, but all the films I worked on as really happy times in my life.
And was that something that you were looking to do more so than become an author, or was it just something that was happening on the side?
It was something I became very interested in kind of my later 10 years. I loved watching the special features on DVDs back when DVDs were a thing. Well, yeah, I loved watching the behind the scenes of movies. I was very interested in how movies got made. And yeah, I just had this real desire to make movies. So yeah, I was fresh out of high school and moved to Sydney to study at film school. And yeah, it was a really great experience.
Well, you've got a couple of great books there that can be turned into movies in the future. So, that's just you can do it all.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
You've got the script. That's all you need. Everything else will fall into place.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever thought, seriously, of writing a book that, when you're writing a book, this could become a movie? Because it does happen, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think not so much that it could become a movie, but because I studied film and learned to make movies, I do think very visually when I write. So when I'm writing a scene, I'm kind of thinking about kind of the camera frame or what the character's looking at, or where every character is in a scene in relation to the other. It has helped me think very visually, but also to think about the soundscape as well, and what the tone of. So it's definitely influenced how I write. Yeah, I don't really write thinking that it's going to be a movie. Kind of the other way around, I guess.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I suppose the two do kind of bleed into each other, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
We ask all our guests this question. If you could go back and tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
I'd tell him that it's going to be okay. You just, don't stress too much. Yeah, just hang in there and the time will come.
We'll have 2 great books out into the universe.
Yeah, exactly. I was very worried about the future when I was a kid. So yeah, I definitely want to relieve some of that stress I had, I think.
Yeah, I suppose you don't know what you don't know, do you?
Yeah, exactly. And it is hard because I wish I wasn't the issues or the worries or concerns that I had, but I also don't know if I would have, I would be where I am right now if I hadn't gone through what I'd gone through. I wish I could have sent some hope back to my younger self. Yeah, just to feel a bit more hopeful at the time.
And that's the thing, I think too, with growing up, where you don't know your future, so that becomes anxiety, and then you put yourself in these boxes where you should achieve this at this age and so forth and moving forward. So that adds to it as well. But if you didn't go through all that, would you be here where you are today? And that's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I do wonder about that, yeah.
If you had an easier ride or certain challenges didn't come up, would you have 2 great books out? And I think that's sometimes the struggles make the journey and make the person in the end.
Yeah, I definitely think so. That's definitely kind of what the second book is about, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on LGBTI Conversations today, and thank you for sharing your 2 great stories. We didn't think this through, and also The Boy from the Mish. Go and get a copy because you must do that. Do yourself a favour, go read it. It's a great book.
Yeah, go read it.
Definitely go read it. No, thanks so much for coming on today's show.
Thanks so much for having me.
If you love listening to LGBTI Conversations, make sure to follow. This will help other people find us much easier. And also, make sure that you never miss out on an episode. Thanks for listening to LGBTI Conversations with me, Anthony Doik.